Hi, and welcome to the lecture on pride. Pride is such a fascinating level to be working at. And in this lecture, we are going to look at it from several different angles. I will walk you through some signs of pride so you can distinguish if this is truly the emotional level where your client is stuck. And we will use many practical examples to help you integrate this information. Pride is the last disempowered emotion on the map of empowerment. What follows after pride is the level of courage, which is where the true empowerment begins. We have all heard the famous pride goes before the fall, but as you will see in this lecture, things are not so black and white when it comes to this emotional level. There are two sides to pride, whether we look at it from the psychological perspective or whether we approach it through the map of empowerment. Even in common language, pride can indicate a sense of satisfaction over our actions or achievements. Maybe we have met an important goal, got promoted, seen our child master a difficult situation really well, or maybe it's just that sense of contentment that we get when we do the right thing, not just in relation to ourselves, but for someone else as well. In other words, pride can be a very positive, motivating feeling if our point of reference is our own moral or behavioral standards, and we do well in relation to these. The problem with pride begins when we start to use others as our point of reference in order to feel better about ourselves, and when we start to feel superior or entitled in relation to them. And this is often unconscious. That is when pride starts to be about hierarchy. The other side of pride is sometimes referred to as hubris, or excessive pride. Pride to the point of arrogance when we start to feel self-righteous because we perceive our beliefs and actions as superior to those of an average person. As with many emotions, pride too has several ways of expressing itself, and often it's not so easy to clearly identify it within ourselves or our clients. It's a little bit of a catch-22 because how do you conclude that someone is resonating in this place of self-righteousness without falling into it yourself? The key to breaking this catch-22 loop is in connecting with this self-righteous place within ourselves and being open to the possibility that when we are working with someone at the level of pride, we might as well end up with a blind spot ourselves. That does not mean that we will be wrong in our estimate of our client, but it enables for a certain level of humbleness that will protect us from becoming self-righteous when we are serving someone who is stuck at this level. Having said that, clients who resonate in pride may sound in all sorts of ways. They don't necessarily have to come across as explicitly arrogant or superior. Sometimes what they give off might be more like a sense of aloofness, distance, coldness, dogma, rigidness, stubbornness, or even vanity, narrow-mindedness, criticism, or knowing it all. And of course, they don't have to be stuck at this level all across the board. Pride can manifest only in a certain aspect of their life, say, in a specific relationship. Looking at pride through the lenses of the map of empowerment, this is the level where we start to feel good about ourselves, but it's still a little bit of a shaky ground to stand on. Pride feels good, but only compared to the emotional places that are below it. Shifting ourselves to pride from the lower emotional places on the map of empowerment gives us a sense of power and self-confidence, but unless we continue our journey of empowerment, we won't be able to sustain it. That is the gift of this level. It gives us enough boost not to fall back to those lower places and move to the empowered part of the emotional spectrum, but in order to truly step into empowerment, we have to resist its trap and not stay stuck in it. So pride really is the tipping point with the potential for the game of empowerment to change completely. But the thing we need to realize is that when we are in pride, we might feel quite good about ourselves, but we are still not resonating at truth and love, which means that we are still not operating as our real, true self, and that there is still an imposter who runs the show of our life. Now, here are a couple of signs that might be able to help you to identify whether or not your client needs help with this emotional level. Like I said before, please always check within yourself that you're in a pure, humble place when you're working at the level of pride. Pride in its negative aspect gets fueled only in relation to something external. Without nothing to compare itself to and feeling superior as a result of that, there would be nothing left for pride. Interestingly, pride is one of the emotions that emerge later in life, around age 2 or 3, because it requires that the sense of self is developed to a certain degree. The same is true for shame. In order to feel shame, the average person, quote unquote, is used as a point of reference for self-evaluation. However, the crucial difference between pride and shame is that in shame, the self comes out of that comparison feeling inferior, while pride results into feeling superior. It is therefore no wonder that these two emotional levels are so interconnected, even though they find themselves far away from each other on the map of empowerment. Pride is often behind a person's drive to be somebody, and that sense of being somebody usually depends on what they achieve or what they look like. It might depend on a certain status. That's why there's often a sense of eliteness at this level. Hand in hand with this drive to be somebody goes almost a fixation on something that is tied to pride's status. When we are in pride, we are usually holding on to something that is related to our status, the one we derive our significance from. From the outside, this might look like a fixation of sorts. Please notice that even at the level of apathy, there's this holding on to feeling, but it's more the holding on to the past, the should have beens and the could have beens, which is why we help clients at this level to get some closure so that they can move on. At the level of pride, on the other hand, this holding on to has more to do with our way. It's almost like our life depends on that thing we're so much holding on to. If you think of your coaching calls with Rosa, you will notice that she's consumed with having this baby to the point that she's starting to lose sight of her life overall.
But I think there's got to be an element, okay, let's get the other pieces of your life back together. And I think you're going to have a much greater chance when you start to feel like it's not all pending on this pregnancy.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to swallow, isn't it?
Yeah,
you want to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort
of
kind
like the be-all and end-all right now. So.
Yeah, and it can't be, though, Rosa.
Yeah.
It can't be. It can't be.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be. And it can't be if you were married and you were trying with your husband every day. It can't be, the reality is, it's hard to say this to somebody, but I talk with clients a lot, and I use things through a scale, sort of like there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to being a 10 when you're really empowered, and things are just happening magically. And, it's often in that place where I'm not saying you still don't take your action steps, but it's when we surrender outcome. Right. When we surrender outcome, and that's a 10, like that's right up there. That's not a place many people are resonating at.
Yeah, and I took your telecourse. So I know the scale. And actually for the fertility, I kind of put myself at willingness right now. So I'm doing all the action items. I'm considering donor eggs, and that's kind of my next step. And so I'm going to the appointments. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. It's just the surrendering part I'm finding very difficult to kind of get to that.
Yeah, because you really have yourself. I want this to be what I want this to be.
Right.
I need this to be what I need it to be.
Mhm.
And do you feel like you're anywhere at a point that you feel ready to say, okay, maybe there's a different way I have to be willing to look at? Because you're saying you're willing. Are you willing to look at different options to make this happen for you? Or are you willing to think adoption? Are you willing to think another way?
The next excerpt is a perfect demonstration of how when we are in pride, we are ready to take action, but our choices are still coming from a fairly limited place. This is why we have to eventually get from the place of pride into that state of neutrality. Notice how for Rosa, the only way to create a family for herself seems to be limited to getting pregnant.
Yeah, and it's made me stronger. It's made me
Of course.
Yeah, it's changed my life. I don't think my life's ever going to be the same again. In a good way.
Yeah.
You kind of figure out who your friends are. You stand up for yourself. Just the drive that's pushing me where a lot of people would have given up already. Yeah. So it's definitely made me stronger.
So tell me now, the drive. Is the drive because you can't believe this hasn't happened for you? Is the drive, I have to have a baby now on my own? Is the drive, I don't want a man? Is the drive, what's the drive right now? What's the driving force behind this?
I don't know. I think when I turned 40, there was that whole, you have certain milestones in your life. And I think the one thing about losing the job and all of that, I think, was money isn't everything, right? Like I look at people around me, and it's like it's the relationships and it's the family and the children, and that's what's important.
But you're not choosing that, Rosa. You're not choosing that.
I thought
That's
I was
not what I'm hearing.
That.
I'm not hearing it's about family and relationships and love. It's about fertility treatments.
Well, because the baby is about that whole love and family and relationship.
But I know you don't want to hear this. I'm just going to be I'm going to be your tough love coach right now. Because there's no point, and maybe a little bit devil's advocate. Maybe it's not really that I believe this, but I just want to throw it out there. That you got a lot pending on this poor kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've got a lot of expectations that when this baby comes into the world, this baby's going to give you all your love.
Yeah.
Like it's a surrogate husband. Like, this is going to be your love. You don't need a man. You're going to have a baby.
No, I still do want a man.
So why are we not focused on healing your heart?
Okay, we can do that.
And helping you find you say, I want love. Well, what if the baby never comes?
Yeah.
What if the baby never comes? And then what?
Then I'll change my focus and start looking for a man, I think. But yeah, I don't think emotionally I'm ready for a man until I do some healing.
So let's talk about why you're not ready. What is it that's, tell me about how let's take away the baby thing for a minute and just know you're going to get a baby one way or the other.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to get a baby one way or the other because you're set on it. If it means you have to adopt a baby, you're getting a baby.
Yep. Okay.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
You're getting a damn baby.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't need to worry about that anymore.
Okay.
We can go back to it.
Okay.
So let's talk a little bit about did you make this decision to say, I don't want a man, I want a baby? Yeah. Why? What happened to your heart?
The biggest fear of someone resonating in apathy is that they will not survive unless something on the outside changes, which is what puts them in a place of victimhood, and they never take action that is self-initiated. The biggest fear of pride is that they might never be loved for who they really are. But contrary to a victim, pride does take action, but it's still motivated by fear, and it limits their choices. Beneath everything, a person resonating in pride, like anyone else, wants to feel that they're worthy of love just as they are, instead of being in a place of almost having no choice other than having to get pregnant, having to close that deal, or whatever other external circumstances they tied their status and worth to. At the level of apathy, you basically want the person to take some action because they are scared of taking action. They are numbed out, they are stuck, and they lack motivation and inspiration to move forward. But with pride, you almost need to encourage them to stop doing what they're doing, at least temporarily, because the action they take at this level is not optimal. It's action based on limited choices, even though pride resonates pretty high on the map of empowerment. It's action that usually is not a win-win or that is not sustainable for the client long term. But pride does not see it because it's looking at the situation from a very narrow perspective. It is almost like the famous quote, "If the only tool you have is a hammer, you treat everything as a nail." In interpersonal relationships, the lack of the win-win approach that is typical for pride often means that in order to shift someone higher up on the map of empowerment, we have to broaden their perspective and include the others into the equation. Shifting into that place of neutrality means that we are able to look at how others will be affected by our decisions and actions. For example, someone in pride might fail to communicate with their partner when things get tough and expect the other person to just hang in there.
So, did your husband say, like, you're consumed with your career and your dad and now I don't fit in here anymore, I'm not happy?
No, he never said any of those things.
How did he come to you and say, I'm wanting to leave?
Just in a conversation one day.
Just in a conversation one day, our 28-year marriage is ending.
Well, I think prior to that, I traveled a lot. So right before I went on a business trip, I mentioned it to him. I was like, we have to talk because, none of the things that were happening in the past were happening. Like, for example, whenever I worked late. Whenever I came home, he would wait for me. When I walked into my house, the garage door came up. He was there waiting for me. He stopped waiting for me. He would always wait up for me. He would always eat with me. None of those things are happening anymore.
Yeah. And when did that start happening? At what point would you say?
I don't know. It had come to a point where I was coming in later and later because I was staying at the hospital until my father was going to sleep. He wouldn't let us leave earlier. So, I guess when it first started to happen, it was like, yeah, I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. So, and I was like, well, it could be because, if he wakes up for me now, he won't get any sleep or whatever. So I was kind of, I guess, making excuses as I saw different things happening.
Yeah.
And, and a big one was for over 20-some-odd years. I don't care what happened. For over 20-odd years, we did not, I always slept in his arms. As soon as whoever got in the bed first, as soon as I got in there, he'd reach for me. That wasn't happening anymore. It was like he was on his side of the bed, and, it was like, again, but I just didn't say anything. And I was probably not saying anything because I knew why. So, and I didn't know how to, I knew the time that I was taking away from our family unit was there. And he had mentioned that once or twice, but I didn't know how to stop it. I didn't know what my choices were.
Yeah.
Because I had a corporate job. I was a vice president. I had responsibilities. And, if you can't say, well, at least for me, I didn't know how to say no there. And I didn't know how to say no to what my father wanted. And he would, do things so that, when we went to the hospital, or at some point he ended up in a nursing home. But what would happen is he wouldn't communicate with the doctors or whoever needed to help him. He would say, wait till my daughters get here.
Mm.
And one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, they were taking him to surgery, and we told him we would be there when he came out of surgery, and then I got a call at 4 o'clock in the morning saying he's refusing to be taken to surgery until you and your sister get here. It was that kind of thing.
So he was very demanding.
Yes.
Very demanding.
I'm just saying that, so I knew that the only time I had to give was my family time. So, yes, that was dwindling. But I thought we would handle that.
Yeah.
And I guess, and my biggest disappointment with it was I didn't believe he would, I thought he would kind of deal with it. I didn't think he would leave me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'd spent 20 years sleeping in each other's arms.
Yes.
And so in 2004, he said, it's just, my dad died. Were you shocked because you thought, oh my gosh, my dad is gone now and I actually have this time?
Right. So once that happened, I kind of looked around and said, oh, like, now let me see. This gave me the opportunity to kind of look around and see what was going on. And at that point, like I said, I did mention to him that I had noticed, these kinds of things, and we needed to put it back together. And when I got home from the business trip, the conversation that we had was, I agree with you, things are not what they used to be, but I'm not interested in fixing them. I'm interested in ending it.
And that made you feel
devastated.
Devastated, yeah.
That was devastating.
Yeah. And did you try to talk him out of it? What did you do at that point?
I don't really think I really tried to talk him out of it because I'm kind of I'm a strange person. Even though that's the one thing, my marriage and my children, that was my rock. When people at work used to say, how can you stand some of the stuff that we go through? It was like, it's okay because I'm going home to that, So that was my rock. But I never want to be with someone who doesn't want to be with me.
Mm-hmm.
So as devastating and as hurt as I was, it was, I can't make you want to be with me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
do you think he wanted you to try to fight for him?
I don't think so, because by the time he said it was over, he was done too. He's really not the type of person to, so, and I kind of think about that too, that he's the kind of person, things were happening, apparently, it's like, he didn't arrive at this overnight, so he was coming to this place, some point in time himself, and by the time he said it was over, then it was over for him.
Mm. And then you were going along 2 years, devastated, sad.
But working.
But still working.
I had my job.
So Sonia did not communicate to her husband that she may have made some mistakes in how she was dealing with the overwhelming situation in her life, even though she knew it was taking its toll on her relationship with her husband and her family. She said to Crystal in her coaching session, "I knew I was taking away from our family unit, and he mentioned it once or twice, but I did not know how to stop it. I did not know what my choices were. I had a corporate job. I was the vice president of a company. I had responsibilities. And I also did not know how to say no to my father. I kind of thought he would deal with it. I did not think he would leave me." When asked if she tried to talk to her husband and talk him out of leaving, she said, "I don't think I really tried to talk him out of it because I'm kind of a strange person. Even though my marriage and my children were my rock, I never want to be with someone who does not want to be with me. Let's listen to the next excerpt for some more detail on this.
My career was always, I traveled and did all of those things, and my parents had a problem with that because I wasn't, taking care of this man and family, I guess, the way they thought I should.
Right. And so inevitably what ended up happening is that you proved them right. You should have been taking care of your family better than you were, and you were not. And inevitably your marriage ended up splitting, and your parents ended up getting to be right. And in a way you got to make them right in their death. And it's interesting that even the way you loved your husband, he was your rock, you didn't have any desire to want to fight to keep that together. Why do you think that is? Because your pride? Do you think it was your pride that just thought, no, if he doesn't want me, then I'm not fighting to make him want to be with me?
I truly felt that. I don't know if it was pride or not, but I truly felt that I'm not going to, the word beg keeps coming to my mind for whatever reason. So I was like, I'm not going to beg you to stay with me. If you don't love me for who I am, then I guess, yeah.
How has that worked for you now that he's left?
I don't know. I wanted to say I was okay with it, but that's not true.
Yeah, just speak the truth. What did your heart say?
I was going to say I'm okay with it, but I'm not, because I'm incredibly sad.
Yes.
I'm sad all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And that's honest. And what you have to ask yourself now, is it more important that you be right, or is it more important that you find love and joy and peace?
Sonia admitted that her career was all-consuming, and when her husband decided to leave, she just did not feel like begging him. Her perceptions of this event seemed to focus on her husband not loving her for who she was. And because she has not reached the place of neutrality here, she does not consider the option that his leaving might have been about something else entirely. For example, about him feeling left out. This is why she instantly thinks of not wanting to beg him, instead of maybe apologizing and expressing her desire to make the marriage work again. To complete this section, let's listen to the final excerpt with Sonia that explains how she was brought up to be proud and not let anyone hurt her.
I take responsibility for myself. So victimize means for me that someone did something to me, and I guess I want to say no, they didn't, but I guess somewhere in there it's maybe I allowed it to happen, and maybe I don't want to admit that I allowed it to happen.
Yeah, I allowed it to happen that my father wouldn't go into surgery, so I rushed to the hospital.
Yes.
I did that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I victimized myself.
Now, see, that I'll buy. That I victimized myself, I'm willing to accept that.
Okay, and why are you not willing to accept that you allowed anybody to victimize you?
It's just me.
I know, but I want you to stay with that and figure that out. So I want to stay with that. Why do you feel, where did you learn that if you let anybody hurt you, that makes you weak?
Well, that was part of how we were brought up. You didn't allow or let anyone do something to you. You fought back. You did whatever you needed to do to, so that no one could do anything to you.
Right.
Before you intervene in any way, it's good to know how to communicate at the level of pride. For a person that resonates here, it's important to acknowledge that they did come a long way. Like we said in the beginning, things are not so black and white with pride. There's often some kind of unusual achievement at this level. In other words, the coach herself has to be in the place of neutrality towards the client and see both sides of the level of pride. You want to let your client know that you understand how empowered they already are, that they have done things, that they have achieved a certain level of success, or showed unusual strength somewhere in their life. You want them to know that you understand that they are a person that is able to take action instead of staying stuck. Let's listen to an example of elevating a client by focusing on an area of her life where she has achieved success.
And how long can you keep going before you run out of money?
Probably.
Because here's the reality. You don't want to have a baby and then go, oh, we have no savings.
Yeah. I mean, I have a house that's paid for, so financially I'm not that bad from that perspective. I've got a good family, and I know I can probably get a job.
How did you get yourself into such a great place by the time you were 40?
You know what? I think it was I just worked hard, and it was luck, and I think I worked more on my career than I did on a lot of the other, like my personal side, and I can see one did really well.
Yeah, I'm asking because you have no idea how many women that I coach are in such a bad place financially. So what advice would you give someone? What would you say? How were you able to pay off a house and have all this money in the bank?
Oh, for me, I think it's just a good education. Good education, work hard, try to do something you love, and even if it's not necessarily something you love, find aspects of your job that you love, that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Once your client trusts that you get them and acknowledge them, you can take it one step further. You can walk them through the map and explain that they are already so close to being truly empowered. You can tell them that what remains to be done in order to shift her to complete the empowerment process is to have the courage to look at her situation from a truly neutral perspective. Pride can resist another way of looking at things, which is why it's sometimes necessary to say something along the lines of, I'm not asking you to do anything just yet, and I'm not saying that you actually don't see it the right way. All I'm saying is, do you have the courage to just consider the possibility that there may be a chance, even a small one, that there's another way of looking at your situation? Do you have the courage to ponder the possibility that you haven't taken into consideration something or someone that should have been taken into consideration? Do you have the courage to admit that maybe there's a chance that you are not seeing the whole picture? Do you have the courage to know the truth about this? As you ask these questions, make sure that they don't actually go into neutrality. Focus just on connecting them with their courage to open up to the possibility that their way might not be the only way. The reason it's so important to do this gradually, first through acknowledging them, then leading them into courage, and only then into neutrality, is because if we do things too fast here, the client won't be able to hear us. One of the tricky aspects of pride is that even if we are 100% right, there may be something more important than that. Sometimes, even if we end up being completely right, we don't end up being completely happy. This is why you may want to ask your clients the question, what would courage have me do if I were to honor myself as well as the other? All right, we covered a lot of ground today, but the bottom line is, as much as pride is a fairly empowered level to be at, it blocks growth, which is why it's necessary to go from pride into courage and neutrality, where we are asked to look at things from a broader perspective. But this will be the subject of another lecture. Until then, bye-bye.